It is without a doubt that we as a nation must revisit the Second Amendment. The fashion in which we go about doing so can seem a bit complicated and controversial, but nevertheless, security and safety are attainable through gun reform policies, better accessibility and performance of mental health services and resources, as well as eradicating the ease of access to firearms. Being concerned with the safety and well-being of those around me is one of the main reasons that I believe that the Second Amendment should be revisited. At a moment's notice, a shooting can happen. We may not think twice about it, but shootings can happen anywhere, at any time, to anyone. Our nation must come together to find solutions to not only alleviate, but also to eventually eradicate mass shootings, which can be undeniably difficult. Jacob Smith and Jonathan Spiegler, in their article titled Explaining Gun Deaths, Gun Control, Mental Illness, and Policymaking in the American States, explain that, quote, "The problem is that there is no agreement over the causes of gun violence, and therefore policies designed to address it are controversial," end quote, as well as, quote, "This disagreement over causes makes it difficult to enact legislation at the federal level to address gun violence, even though the disparity in gun deaths by state might suggest that implementing the same policies across the country would help those states that suffer disproportionately from gun violence," end quote. The safety and well-being of our fellow Americans being threatened is all the more reason to revisit the Second Amendment. An issue that is often forgotten in the midst of chaos and fear is the chain reaction that follows. The aftermath of mass shootings consists not only of casualties, but permanent scars on those that survived and lived to see another day. The victims are haunted by the trauma that they have endured and left with no aid to recover and heal. The journey through grievance is certainly not an easy one, and living with the loss of friends, loved ones, and neighbors takes a toll on one's mental health. In their article titled, After the Gunfire Stops, Mary Tolan describes that once the shootings have taken place and the damage is done, quote, "The media has moved on to the next big story, and the politicians finish pontificating on gun reform. The surviving individuals and communities are left to deal with their losses for years to come, likely for the rest of their lives. A ripple effect emanates from each shooting, spinning outwards and impacting more people over time," end quote. In addition, she also mentions that, quote, "The impact is much deeper than a soundbite. Those wounded are left with often permanent injuries, limbs that don't work, and pain that won't go away," end quote. A reasonable approach and solution to the subject matter is to decrease the ease of access to firearms, as well as increasing access to mental health services for not only the victims of mass shootings, but also for the shooters. Mass shooters are notorious for being plagued with some sort of mental illness such as schizophrenia, depression, suicidal ideation, or attempts. In his article titled, What We Know About School Shooters, Scott Poland states that, quote, "It is essential for schools to improve their ability to detect at-risk students and provide appropriate treatment and or have working relationships with community mental health services," end quote. It should also be noted that the lack of effective gun reform policies from both political parties in both chambers of Congress has also led to an exponential rise in mass shootings. In regards to social reform and change, the people can only accomplish so much without local, state, and federal governments becoming involved. In their report titled Gun Violence, Prediction, Prevention, and Policy, the American Psychological Association states that, quote, "The licensing of handgun purchasers, background check requirements for all gun sales, and close oversight of retail gun sellers can reduce the diversion of guns to criminals. Reducing the incidence of gun violence will require interventions through multiple systems, including legal, public health, public safety, community, and health." Increasing the availability of data and funding will help inform and evaluate policies designed to reduce gun violence, end quote. Although guns are ingrained within American culture, the conversation in regards to gun safety, gun reform policies, and addressing the spike in mass shootings must be addressed immediately. It is without a doubt that we, as a nation, must revisit the Second Amendment. The seemingly endless casualties of our fellow neighbors has gone on for far too long. The security and safety of our fellow Americans lies in the hands of Congress. By reforming gun policies, allowing more accessibility and better performance of mental health resources, and eradicating the ease of access to firearms, we as a nation can help prevent mass shootings in the future and save lives.